The Rwanda-backed M23 rebel group has pulled out of peace talks with Democratic Republic of Congo, which had been scheduled for Tuesday. Now, the group cited European Union sanctions against some of its members. M23 escalated its offensive in January, seizing control of the strategic cities of Goma and Bukavu in eastern Congo near the border with Rwanda. The conflict has killed thousands of civilians and displaced millions of people, prompting a humanitarian crisis. Now, hopes had been high for these talks to end the conflict, which has Congo's mineral wealth at its heart.
These are rare pictures of the largest coltan mine in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But it is now under the control of Rwanda-backed rebel group M23. And many here are already getting used to working under the new rulers.
Over time, living conditions became increasingly difficult, and this job no longer allows me to meet my needs. That is why I decided to join the M23 to defend my country.
Controlling mines has been a war strategy of the M23 group. According to UN experts, M23 earns nearly $1 million in revenue from this coltan mine alone. But the fighting has had devastating effects. Around 600,000 people have fled armed clashes between Congolese government forces and M23 rebels. Thousands have been killed. To end the violence, Angola was set to host talks between Congo and M23. Before the rebels pulled out, people living in the eastern city of Bukavu, recently occupied by M23, saw talks as the only solution.
The government should be flexible and ready to dialogue with those who hold weapons, who have demands, and work with them to find a solution so that the population can breathe.
We call on all warring parties to sit around a table and talk about Congo, to talk as Congolese about the problems that are currently ours. We hope, therefore, that through dialogue, the population will be relieved and that we can finally live in peace we seek so much.
But mistrust runs high. Congo and M23 have repeatedly accused each other of violating ceasefires in the past.
For more, I'm very pleased to welcome Raymond Mujuni, Deputy Executive Director at the African Institute for Investigative Journalism. He joins us today from Kampala in Uganda. So we have just heard the news that M23 has now pulled out of these talks. Do we know why?
Well, the official reason that the M23 has given for pulling out of the talks is the fact that sanctions have been leveled against members of the M23. The European Union and the United Kingdom have both sent sanctions down to members of the M23, leaders of the M23, included spokesperson and some of its leaders. So that's complicated what should have been the talks happening in Angola a little bit.
Have they complicated the talks or made them a non-starter? Is it possible to negotiate without M23 representatives present?
It's very difficult to have any peaceable negotiation about the Eastern DRC that doesn't involve the M23. Of course, we've had previous talks before, the Rwanda peace process led by Angola. We've had the Nairobi peace process led by Uhuru Kenyatta. Both of those did not have the M23 at the center of them. This was the first time that the AFC and M23 were going to be part of the talks and part of the table, arriving at peace in the Eastern DRC. Now that they're not part of those conversations, it's going to be a little bit harder to even get anywhere. Of course, the M23 still control Bukavu, they still control Goma, they control majority parts of the Eastern DRC, they control mineral wealth, they're moving downwards towards Walikale, which are some of the biggest minerals in the Eastern DRC too. It's going to be very difficult for the Congolese government to continue acting without the M23, but even more difficult to find a peaceable conclusion to this conflict without talking to members of the M23, or at least their leadership.
Tell me a little bit more about the importance of mines and mineral wealth in this conflict. Is that really what is at the heart of this?
Minerals are not at the heart of the conflict, but they provide the revenue that the rebel groups use in fighting the conflict. What's at the heart of the conflict really is the state of the DRC. In Eastern DRC, there's very thin presence of the Democratic Republic of Congo state. There's very little security. There's no infrastructure development in terms of roads and hospitals. And the M23, of course, belong to a smaller ethnic group, the Congolese Tutsis, who they say have been targeted for extermination by members of the FDLR who operate in the Eastern DRC in some way or the other in unison with the government of the DRC. So minerals are at the heart of getting revenue to fight the war, but they are not the very reason for why the war is happening. Of course, Congo is mineral rich. It has tin, it has tungsten, it has coltan, and all these minerals are important in global production. They're important in chip production, for example. They're important in the production of smartphones. So therefore, they are very highly sought after minerals. And anyone who controls the mining areas then controls the revenues that come out of those mining areas and can use those revenues. What we've seen the AFC and M23 do in the last 2 months is use part of those revenues to sort of put up administrative centers in the Eastern DRC, but also to rearm themselves in case of any possible fallout with the DRC government.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. We've been speaking with Raymond Mujuni, Deputy Executive Director at the African Institute for Investigative Journalism.